Okay. Yesterday, I believe we were on this slide as the bell rang, so we didn't really get to it, but we've been talking about cell diversity, meaning the differences in the cell. So the structural differences in them that allow for the functionality to be different, that allows us to perform all these different functions that keep us alive. So, cells that move organs and body parts. We started talking about the skeletal muscles. Those are the ones that are attached to our skeleton, hence the name, that allow us to move. It gives us our locomotion. We can move from place to place. We can do all the things that we can do because we are able to move. But then there are also smooth muscle cells that help with the movement of things inside of the body. So we find smooth muscle cells in parts of the cardiovascular system, which help to have contractile units like in your blood vessels that help to keep the flow of blood moving along with your heart. A lot of our hollow organs, our stomach and our intestines, have smooth muscles in them that will contract and help with the digestive process. So, smooth muscles are going to be your involuntary. They work on their own. We don't have to have that conscious decision to move them like we do our skeletal muscles. Like when you want to run, like you have to like consciously make that decision to run, right? Some of us just don't do that. So here are two illustrations of muscle, skeletal muscle versus smooth muscle. And when we look at these under the microscope, you will see a pretty significant difference in their appearance, even though they are both contracting and shortening and causing movement of some sort. But we will see that difference when we take a better look at them. Cells that store nutrients such as fat cells. Okay, within these cells, the majority of the cells taken up by a lipid droplet. Lipid is another name for a fat, and it gets stored in the cytoplasm, and not a whole lot of other function for those cells other than to store those fats. So here is what a fat cell looks like. As you can see, this lipid droplet inside takes up the majority of the space inside of it. Cells that fight diseases within our body, white blood cells are responsible for that a lot of times. A macrophage, which is a phagocytic cell, will digest infectious microorganisms. So our immune system works to fight off those cells or those microorganisms, bacteria, viruses, when they infect our body, form a response to that, go into overdrive, make more of those and release those so that they can take care of those dangerous microorganisms. Here's an illustration of it. You can see inside of here it has some lysosomes that are located inside of it. They contain those enzymes that will help to break things down. So it will engulf bacterial cells, viruses, anything else that is like foreign substances in the body, engulfs them, releases the enzymes from the lysosome to help break it down, and then it can get rid of those as waste products, or the cell can sometimes recycle those parts. Cells can gather information and control body functions. This is a nerve cell. This is what this blue cell on the board is. It is a nerve cell. Nerve cells are also called neurons. And they are essential in sending messages to and from our central nervous system. And the central nervous system will formulate responses to any stimuli that there is. So, central nervous system being the brain and the spinal cord. So messages get sent there so that they can formulate a response to whatever the stimulus is. So, illustration of a nerve cell has all these little projections that come off of it, and that helps to be efficient at relaying messages throughout the body. Reproductive cells. Females produce oocyte, which is the egg. It is the largest cell that human bodies have. And will divide and become an embryo upon fertilization. Males make sperm cells, which are the smallest cells of the human body. Built for swimming to the egg for fertilization. Have that flagellum on it. Acts as a motile whip. So it's kind of like a tadpole. They can swim through water with that long tail. Sperm cells are able to swim through the female reproductive system to fertilize the egg in the fallopian tube. And then an embryo is formed and is the start of life. We already saw that picture. All right, so that kind of wraps up our talk about the anatomy of cells, so what their structures are, and a little bit about their function, but we're going to go into more about the function of the cells, what they can actually do. And it's not every cell does every single one of these, but they have the capability of doing it. It's just dependent on what genes are being activated of what the cell is actually going to do. It's how we become the differentiated organisms that we are. Remember talking about cell differentiation? Every single cell, minus your blood cells, but every single cell in our body has the exact same DNA in it. So why is every cell not exactly the same? Because of what genes get activated. So that specific code of the DNA that gets activated say, this is what your function is going to be. So the different genes that are switched on within that cell. But they all have the same capability theoretically because every single cell has the exact same DNA in it. So all cells have the ability to metabolize, digest food, dispose of waste, reproduce, grow, move, and respond to stimuli. And depending on the type of cell that it is, it might do these better than other types of cells, may not do them at all, might do them faster. Okay, again, depends on what genes are turned on in the cell. So, first thing we're going to talk about is membrane transport. It's really important for membrane to be what we call semi-permeable, meaning that it lets certain things in and certain things out, but keeps some things from entering and some things from leaving. Selective on what it lets through. So, a solution, which is a homogeneous mixture of two or more compounds. Should be components, not compounds. I can't read apparently. I already did too much reading today. I'm just done reading. And a solution is made up of two things. We have a solvent and a solute. Remember that a solvent is the dissolving medium present in the larger quantity, and the body's main solvent is water. Water is a universal solvent. It can dissolve a lot of things in it. And that includes things in the human body, things that we consume, things that must be dissolved in water in order for them to be transported around the body, and in order for them to go through chemical processes in order to create things that our body needs, or to get rid of things that are waste products. And then the thing that is dissolved in the solvent is the solute. Components in smaller quantities within a solution. So if we had a solution of salt water, water being the solvent, salt being the solute. So when we talk about metabolism, we talk about chemical reactions that take place within the cells. A lot of those chemical reactions take place because of the solutions that are present, things that are dissolved in water that can then undergo a chemical reaction. So part of the transport has to do with the intracellular fluid and the extracellular fluid. So what is inside of the cell and what is outside of the cell. So the intracellular fluid is going to be nucleoplasm and cytosol. So nucleoplasm, that substance that's inside of the nucleus. The cytosol, remember, that's the jelly-like substance that we normally call cytoplasm, but specifically talking about just the fluid that's in there. And the intracellular fluid is a solution that has dissolved gases, nutrients, and salts in it. We also have extracellular fluid. It is also called interstitial fluid. And this is fluid that is on the exterior of the cell. So extracellular, exterior. So you have fluid inside of the cell, you have fluid outside of the cell, in between other cells. Extracellular fluid or interstitial fluid. And contains ingredients like nutrients, hormones, neurotransmitter, salts, and waste products. So anything that leaves the cell can be found in interstitial fluid. Might be in the process of being transported to some other cell, but can be found in that extracellular fluid. So, as I said before, the plasma membrane is selectively permeable, meaning that it allows some materials to pass through, so in or out of the cell, but some are excluded from being able to pass through. However, Just like everything else in the body, the plasma membrane is not 100% efficient. Sometimes stuff gets into the cell that's not supposed to get into the cell, like bacteria or viruses. They infect the cells, and then we get sick. So examples of it being selectively permeable and actually doing its job, nutrients being able to enter into the cell, and then undesirable substances being kept out. This could be waste products. So waste products that have left a cell, entered into the extracellular matrix. Okay, the cells adjacent to it are not going to let that in, like carbon dioxide. That is a waste product of cellular respiration. We want to get rid of that. If we have a buildup of carbon dioxide in our cells, cells don't function anymore. So we'll not let that back into the cell, enters into the bloodstream, gets carried back to the lungs where we exhale it. Two types of transport that we are going to talk about, passive and active. In passive transport, substances are able to cross the membrane without any energy input from the cell. Water can cross the membrane pretty easily without having to have any energy to make it cross through the membrane. And then active processes, this requires an input of energy called ATP in order to transport substances across the membrane.
In order for us to use the molecules and energy we get from food, we must transport them across cell membranes. Transport of nutrients is essential for all cells, but we'll use cells in the small intestine to teach the principles of membrane transport. Let's zoom into the surface of an intestinal cell. The plasma membrane is selectively permeable. Some molecules can move across it, while others cannot. How do materials enter and leave cells? Lipids, such as these yellow molecules, can move freely across the lipid bilayer. Notice that the lipid molecules move down their concentration gradient from where they are more concentrated to where they are less concentrated. This is an example of simple diffusion. Diffusion is a form of passive transport. It does not require energy from the cell, but it does depend on the concentration gradient, size and charge of the molecule or ion. However, most molecules cannot cross the lipid bilayer. Instead, molecules like the sugar fructose move into intestinal cells by facilitated diffusion, moving down their concentration gradient and through transport proteins. It also differs because it acts only on specific molecules, and the transport proteins can become saturated, reducing the amount of diffusion. However, facilitated diffusion doesn't require energy from the cell, so, like simple diffusion, it's a form of passive transport. The majority of water molecules cross the plasma membrane by facilitated diffusion, also called osmosis. through specific protein channels called aquaporins. Some ions, such as sodium and potassium, require transport against their concentration gradients. The sodium-potassium pump actively transports these ions from where they are less concentrated to where they are more concentrated. This process requires energy from the cell and is known as active transport. Energy from ATP is used to move 3 sodium ions, shown in red, out of the cell, and 2 potassium ions, shown in blue, into the cell. Because the pump uses ATP directly, this type of transport is called primary active transport. Another type of active transport, secondary active transport, also moves chemicals against gradients. It doesn't use ATP as a direct source of energy. Instead, it uses the downhill gradient from one ion or molecule to drive the uphill movement of another ion or molecule. For example, sodium and glucose move into the cell by secondary active transport in a process called cotransport or symport, because both substances are moving in the same direction. Sodium ions move down their concentration gradient created by the sodium-potassium pump. But because glucose concentrations inside the cell can quickly exceed those outside the cell, glucose moves against its concentration gradient. The cell moves larger materials, such as proteins, from the intracellular fluid to the extracellular fluid, using vesicles that fuse with the plasma membrane and release their contents outside the cell. This process is called exocytosis. In endocytosis, the plasma membrane pinches in, forming a vesicle that contains material from outside the cell. Cells use all these processes, passive and active transport, exocytosis and endocytosis, to move materials across their membranes.
All right. So now we're gonna have some notes on all those types of transport that you just saw. So, easiest one, which is a passive process, is diffusion. Molecules will move from a high concentration to a low concentration. We say that is going down a concentration gradient. So it's like if you put a ball on top of a hill and you push it, where's it gonna go? Down the hill, right? It's the same thing. So it went from high to low. So these molecules are going to go from an area where it's a high concentration, meaning there are a lot of them, and it's going to go down to an area where there's a low concentration. Particles will distribute themselves evenly within a solution when given time. Kinetic energy causes the molecules to move about randomly. And the size of the molecule and temperature will affect the speed of diffusion. What do we know about particles as they heat up? They expand. Because they are? Not necessarily. They're moving faster. They have more energy to them. They're moving faster. So when a solution is warm, then that diffusion process is going to happen much faster.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
What?
Can we use your room for Yo Camp on October 3rd?
Who's gonna be supervising?
Good question. I don't know. But we're not gonna like sleep in it. We just need it for like the scavenger hunt.
I suppose.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Also, particles that are larger in size are going to have a harder time moving around, so it takes a little bit longer if they are larger molecules in order to disperse evenly. I was supposed to show that, but page 77, it has this figure on it, just showing how diffusion works. Drop a little tablet in there, like, you know, when you dye Easter eggs, put the colored tablet in there. And over time, it will eventually dissolve and disperse itself evenly. That is a process of diffusion. So diffusion in cells will happen if molecules are small enough to pass through the membrane's pores. If the molecules are lipid soluble and the molecules are assisted by a membrane carrier. Couple different types of diffusion. We have simple diffusion. This is an unassisted process. And solutes are lipid soluble or small enough that allows them to pass through the membrane itself. Page 78 in your book has some illustrations there of the different types of transport through the plasma membrane. So this one being the simple diffusion, again being lipid soluble, so it can pass through the membrane itself, or if they are incredibly small, they are able to pass through as well. Our next type is osmosis, which is the diffusion of water. So highly polar water molecules easily cross the plasma membrane through channels called aquaporins. So a little protein that is embedded in the membrane, and it allows the passage of water through the membrane. And the water is also going to move down its concentration gradient. So it goes from high concentration to low concentration. So when you are thirsty, means what? Why? Why is your body triggering you to be thirsty? What is running out of water though? Your cells. It means that your body is using up the water that is in your cells. Might be for some of those cellular processes, but it could also be because if you're like, doing sports and you're sweating, some of that water is exiting your body as sweat, right? And so that triggers your body to be thirsty. You drink water, and so you have a low concentration of water inside of the cells. You drink it, your body starts to absorb it, gets in your bloodstream, and then it goes from the bloodstream back into your cells. So high concentration, then to a low concentration, and it helps to even that out. So then you're not dehydrated. Because what happens if you get dehydrated? Well, if you get that dehydrated, yes. Okay, because the metabolic reactions, all the chemical reactions that take place, they have to have water present. If water's not present, they can't take place. You can't undergo cellular respiration and create that energy that you need, right? And so then your cells start to shut down because they don't have that water present in order for them to function correctly. So this is just showing an aquaporin, that protein that's embedded in the cellular membrane and allows for the passage of water through it. So osmosis is going to be dependent on the type of solution that is present in your body. And so we have isotonic, hypertonic, and hypotonic solutions that can exist in your body. And that has to do with the ratio of the solvents to the solute. So something that is isotonic, it has the same solute and water concentrations inside a cell and outside of a cell. So page 79 has some red blood cells there for us to look at. And those red blood cells are put into different types of solutions. The first one being an isotonic solution. Has the same concentration of water and salt inside the cell as it does outside of the cell. When that happens, when it's equal, water still moves across the membrane, but it moves into the cell and out of the cell at the same rate. So if we have that cell there, water moves into the cell and out of the cell at the same rate. Those are supposed to be the same length to show that they're at the same rate. I'm a terrible artist, I'm sorry. You guys all know this about me already. Okay, so same concentration inside the cell and outside the cell. Okay, hypertonic solutions contain more solutes than the cells do, and the cell begins to shrink. Okay, so cell begins to shrivel up because more water is leaving the cell than is entering the cell. And then a hypotonic solution, the solution that the cell is in contains fewer solutes, which means more water than the cells do, and the cell becomes really plump. Okay, it starts to grow because there's more water coming into the cell than is leaving the cell. So if you think about this in terms of hypertonic, hyper means what? Like when you guys drink too much pop, you get hyper, right? Maybe, possibly. Okay, too much pop, too much sugar. Hypertonic, so it contains more solutes, contains lots of sugar. You get hyper, there's too much, okay? versus hypotonic. So hypertonic and hypotonic are opposites of each other. If hypertonic means there's too much, hypotonic means there's not enough, right? Or there's fewer. So hypertonic means there's a lot of dissolved salts in it or dissolved substances in it. Hypotonic means that does not have a lot of dissolved substances in it. And then isotonic means equal. So here is the picture that is in your book showing the red blood cells in different solutions. So this one goes here with this one. Okay, water is entering and leaving at the same rate. This one we have it leaving at a higher rate than what it is entering because it's a hypertonic solution. Lots of solutes out here. And so we have a high concentration of water inside, low concentration of water on the outside, so the water moves out faster than it moves in. And in a hypotonic solution, we have high concentration of water on the outside, low concentration of water on the inside, so the water is going to start moving into the cell. All right, our next type of diffusion is a facilitated diffusion. Transports lipid insoluble and large substances. So these are things that cannot just pass through the membrane. They have to use channel proteins that will help to move substances across the membrane. So glucose is a large molecule, cannot just pass through it. It has to go through a channel protein or a carrier protein in order to get into the cell. So here we have a channel protein. Basically, it's just an open channel, an open tunnel that gets stuff into and out of a cell. Here, carrier protein, it actually has to open up to one side or the other, and it will only do that when something binds to it. It has a specific slot. It's kind of like a key and a lock. Keys can only open certain locks. You might be able to put a key into the lock, but you can't necessarily turn it. And so these will only open up when it actually goes in and binds with it. The correct molecule goes in and binds with it. All right, last of our passive processes is filtration. So water and solutes are forced through a membrane by fluid or hydrostatic pressure. And a pressure gradient must exist that pushes solute containing fluid, filtrate, from high pressure area to a low pressure area. And this is how our kidneys work due to pressure. So it's like if there's really high pressure in something, what does that object want to do? Say you have a bottle of pop and you shake it up and you have a lot of pressure in it. Okay, it tries to expand and it tries to relieve that pressure, right? So that's kind of what happens in the filtration process is you get a high pressure and it forces it out of it then. So when you go to open your pop after it's been shaken, what happens to it? Right? It relieves that pressure, has to go somewhere. And so that pressure is being relieved because it's getting pushed through the membrane then.